welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
So today, we're diving into Somalia's political transition, but through a very specific lens.
That's right. We're focusing on a paper by Abdullahi Mohuddin Hassan Abdullahi Yabaro. He's a legal researcher, master of law.
And his paper offers a particular perspective, using this really striking metaphor.
Yeah, the dead horse theory. It's central to his whole analysis of what's been happening.
Okay, let's unpack that. The dead horse theory.
Yeah.
What exactly is it, according to the source, and how does it relate to Somalia's past?
Well, the paper traces it back to Dakota tribal wisdom.
Okay.
And the idea is pretty simple, really. If the horse you're riding dies,
Huh?
well, the sensible thing is to get off.
Right. Stop putting effort into something that's clearly not going anywhere.
Exactly. It's about recognizing futility and moving on.
And the paper takes this image and applies it to Somalia's historical political setup. That sounds pointed.
It is quite pointed, yeah. For, over 20 years, Somalia used an indirect electoral system?
So not people voting directly.
No, it was more like clan elders, various intermediaries. They selected the members of parliament.
And then those MPs chose the president, the executive.
Correct. And the paper's argument is that this system, despite, being around for so long, it fundamentally failed. It didn't bring stability, didn't create accountability. It was, in the paper's view, a dead horse.
Why dead, specifically?
Yeah.
Because it excluded people.
That's a huge part of it.
Yeah.
The vast majority of Somalis were just, left out of the process.
Mm-hmm.
It kept power in the hands of a small elite, and according to the source, it just couldn't deliver what the country needed.
Yeah.
No matter the tinkering, it wasn't working.
Okay, so that's the past system, is the dead horse.
Yeah.
But the paper argues something has changed recently, that Somalia is dismounting.
Yes, exactly. That's the shift the paper focuses on. It says Somalia has started to get off the dead horse.
How so? What's the key action?
It points to the federal parliament. The paper describes it as the sole national body with real legal and representative authority. And this parliament took a landmark step. They enacted legislation for direct elections. One person, one vote.
And critically, the paper stresses this came from inside Somalia.
Absolutely. It wasn't pushed from the outside, according to this analysis. It came out of their own legal processes, their own debates.
Reflecting a demand from the people.
That's the argument, a collective desire for, actual democracy, real participation, Somalia taking charge of its direction.
Does the paper give any, concrete examples of this public demand?
It does. It talks about thousands of people, especially in Mogadishu, actively registering to vote.
Even with challenges. Security, resources.
Yeah, despite all that. The paper suggests their motivation is a genuine belief in having a direct say through the ballot box.
And why single out Mogadishu?
Well, the source highlights its unique position. It's apparently the only city consistently providing federal tax revenue.
Ah, okay. Funding the government.
Pretty much. So the argument is those residents especially deserve direct representation given their contribution.
Okay, so internal momentum towards direct democracy. Somalia dismounting, but then the paper looks at the international reaction, and it's critical.
Very critical. This is where the other part of the metaphor comes in, flogging a dead horse.
Meaning trying to beat life back into the old, failed system.
Precisely. The paper observes that some parts of the international community have had a kind of subdued reaction to these internal democratic moves.
Subdued how?
Well, the source points to official statements emphasizing things like dialogue, consensus, inclusivity.
Which sound good on the surface.
Theoretically, yes, but the paper argues that in Somalia's specific context, these terms have often been used in a way that actually empowers unelected elites.
At the expense of the elected parliament.
Exactly, at the expense of the legitimate institutions that are trying to move forward.
So when international actors call for bringing all stakeholders to the table, how does the paper interpret that term, stakeholders?
According to this source, stakeholders often ends up being a sort of code, a euphemism for bringing back former presidents, former prime ministers, former MPs.
People from the old system who don't currently have a mandate from voters.
Correct. Unelected figures. And the paper argues that pushing for their inclusion in consensus talks is essentially trying to prop up the old, failed system.
That's the flogging. Persisting with strategies tied to the dead horse.
That's the paper's core argument there, yes. It's seen as counterproductive diplomacy.
The paper actually uses specific examples from the original dead horse theory sayings to illustrate this flogging, doesn't it?
It does. It draws direct parallels, like buying a stronger whip.
Okay, how does that translate to Somalia, according to the paper?
The paper argues it's like when external actors insist on including these unelected figures in the political process over and over.
And that's like using a stronger whip because...
Because, the paper says, it undermines the actual elected parliament. It messes up the timelines for the new election laws.